When I woke up, the sight of a hospital room with white curtains fluttering in front of me spread out. I got up and confirmed that my head was wrapped in bandages. There was a strange discomfort, as if the shock of hitting my head had scattered fragments of my memory. The feeling was bizarre, as if the pain all over my body from falling down the stairs had been a dream. Eventually, a doctor entered the room and asked if I could remember what happened before I lost consciousness. When I clearly answered that I had fallen down the stairs, the doctor showed a relieved expression. It seems there was no major damage to my head or brain from the tests. I had been unconscious for just a few hours, and apparently, my husband and my son Daniel had called the ambulance. The shaking wasn't that big, and everything else is okay, the doctor informed me. So, it was just me getting startled by misstepping. Suddenly feeling embarrassed from the relief, I couldn't help but give a wry smile. Then, I realized that my family, who should have been with me, was nowhere to be seen. When I asked the nearby nurses about my husband and Daniel, they began to exchange glances. One of the nurses hesitated before speaking. "Well, it's hard to say. My name is Luna. I turned 45 this year. My father used to teach drawing. So, from a young age, I was taught not just how to use a brush by my father at home, but also manners. Influenced by my father, who was a teacher, I blossomed in my talent and dreamt of opening my own school someday, just like him. Perhaps it was due to learning from my father. But I had confidence in my drawing. In drawing classes at school, I was always praised by the teacher. Each time, my father would stroke my head happily but always said the same thing. "Luna, it's also good to express yourself more freely." In my memories, my father was always kind and serious about the world of creative arts. Eventually, having obtained the treasures of my beloved husband and my son Daniel, the dream of opening a school became a distant memory of the past. Though there were ups and downs after moving out when I got married, I was living a happy life. Eventually, my parents passed away. Being an only child, I was at a loss on how to handle the now empty family home, but after discussing with my husband, we decided to move back to my childhood home. Living in the home I shared with my late parents, now living with my husband and Daniel, I felt profound happiness. The school I learned from my father as a child was untouched, spared from becoming cluttered with unnecessary items, as if time had stood still since then. My father, until his death, seems to have taught the neighborhood kids in this studio. My mother, who was left behind, apparently cleaned this studio regularly that my late father left behind. "Luna, sorry, but could you move aside a bit?" My husband said, as he placed some cardboard boxes in the corner of the room that used to be the studio. Right before we moved back to his family home, my husband quit his job. It seems his salary had plateaued, and he was dissatisfied with both his role and the financial rewards. With the move as a catalyst, he decided to leave his job and start a second-hand business from the spacious family home, selling and buying goods online. It seemed unlikely that leaving his job to start a new business would go smoothly. Despite my worries, my husband was continuously acquiring new items, and the number of packages began to increase. New cardboard boxes appeared in the house daily, and many items were being stored in an unused room on the second floor. Meanwhile, Daniel, who had dropped out of college, was spending more time at home. He was helping with the second-hand business but seemed to be struggling to find his own path. There was no prior discussion about quitting his job. A few months before moving back home, he simply said, "I quit my job," without much explanation. Daniel also dropped out of college without consulting me. Despite feeling anxious about my family's unilateral decisions, I witnessed my husband and Daniel working together and accomplishing their work. They were making various efforts online, like soliciting for appraisal requests and preparing items for sale, appearing to enjoy the process through trial and error. I tried not to interfere with their efforts, focusing instead on ensuring they had a conducive work environment daily. "Looks like my dream of opening my studio is gonna have to wait. Now, I'm focusing on supporting my family." That was my top priority. In the corner of the now unused studio, I felt sorry and sad to see the tools and books that were once used, now piled up. Upstairs, my husband and Daniel were busy with the business. I sat by a window in the living room, opening my father's brush case. Inside, I found the brushes my father had cherished. As I reached out to touch them, I heard my husband's voice from behind. "Luna, what's up?" Holding a brush firmly, I turned around. "I wanted to run a studio, like my dad, but it seems hard to start now." My husband listened quietly to my words and nodded slightly. Stepping closer, he placed a hand on my shoulder. "Luna, you've got a talent for creative arts. I think you could run a studio, but could you support me until my business takes off?" His words were comforting, though I felt a bit sidelined. He continued with a smile. "Let's support each other's dreams as a family. Let's work hard together." I had a feeling that the day to open my studio might never come. But for now, his kind words and warm hand made me happy. One evening, my husband and Daniel seemed busy working upstairs. They were moving boxes down to the car and back up again while on the phone, leaving me no chance to speak. After some thought, I decided to quietly bring them some drinks. As I neared the room, I heard the sounds of them packing. Opening the door, both my husband and Daniel stopped what they were doing and looked at me in surprise. "Luna, is something wrong?" "Just came to see how you're doing. You both must be tired, right? I brought some drinks." My husband, with a wry smile, pointed to the items on the desk. It was a wallet from a brand I even knew was famous. "I've got so much on my plate, and it seems like it never ends. You know how income from secondhand goods can be unstable and sometimes you just get it wrong?" I showed my understanding. Even though I had been worried and anxious about quitting the corporate life to start a new business, since my husband seemed happier than in his employee days, I kept my silence. However, lately, my husband and Daniel started to frequently check the prices and information of goods almost daily, even when shopping or going out, habitually checking market prices on their smartphones. Even on the occasional day off, if they found out there was a market nearby, they'd excitedly browse the goods, saying, "You can't underestimate markets, sometimes people sell valuable things without realizing their worth." I was getting a bit tired of constantly talking about the price of things. Even about the pieces left by my father, a famous artist, they'd seriously discuss how much they might sell for. To me, those were memorials of my father, and the mere thought of selling them felt like blasphemy. Yet, I tried to accept our differences in values and kept my patience until one day, I got really angry. My husband and Daniel, jokingly at first, talked about selling a piece I wrote as if it was done by a famous artist. They praised my skills as indistinguishable to an amateur's eye, but my feelings were mixed. The conversation started off lighthearted but became more serious, and I yelled at them seriously. "Absolutely not! I can't even believe you'd think of such a thing. Do you have any idea how much I learned from Dad means to me? For me, it is a memory and connection to my father. The idea of using my skills, acquired through my bond with my father, for such impure actions filled me with intense repulsion." Seeing how upset I was, my husband quickly tried to backtrack. "No, it was just a joke. Daniel was just joking." Daniel, surprised to be dragged into this, murmured. I could tell they were trying hard to appease me, now visibly upset. Perhaps because of this incident, my husband and Daniel found reasons to keep me out of the business. I sensed this and avoided going upstairs where they worked. One morning, as my husband was supposed to be out on an important deal, he called my phone in a panic. I could sense my husband's panic over the phone. "Luna, something terrible happened. I forgot some crucial documents I needed for the meeting. I'm on my way back now, but it looks like I'm gonna be late. Can you please hurry and get the documents and wait for me at the front door?" He was breathing heavily, seemingly rushing back home in the car. Our garage is tight, and parking takes a while, so he wanted to save time by exchanging the documents at the front of the house. He wanted to save a bit of time by stopping in front of the house to hand off the documents. "I can't get through to Daniel, who's supposed to be at home. Maybe he's out, I don't know, but there are some documents on the desk upstairs, so please bring them all. And really, don't look inside the documents, they're very important." After saying okay, There was a few seconds of silence before my husband emphasized, "Really, don't peek inside." "I wouldn't look at work documents anyway," I replied, feeling slightly offended that he seemed not to trust me. Despite this, I went upstairs for the first time in a while and opened the door. I was shocked by the mess that greeted me, with hardly any space to step. Daniel, whom I thought wasn't home, turned around in surprise at my visit. When I explained I was there to deliver some important documents for my husband, he pointed at the desk, then went back to staring at his computer screen. "Oh, sorry. I was so busy I didn't notice Dad's call. The documents are all together, so could you take all the ones in that envelope?" Seeing Daniel scratch his messy hair and quickly type on the keyboard with an annoyed look, I felt a bit annoyed myself. But remembering that time was running short, I steeled myself to get going. Just as I grabbed the envelope and was about to head down the stairs, I heard the sound of a car slamming on the brakes outside. I panicked, thinking it was my husband, when suddenly a sharp noise came from the wall near the stairs. The moment I realized it, my feet wobbled and I lost my balance. I tumbled down the violently shaking stairs and finally came to a stop, groaning in pain from the intense discomfort all over my body. My vision started to dim and blur. From afar, I thought I could hear Daniel shouting my name. Soon, his voice and all other sounds seemed to be drawn into a distant world, and my consciousness faded away. At that time, I had lost consciousness. And I believe I was dreaming. It was back when my father was still alive, drawing together in his class. With a gentle voice, my father said, "Luna, you draw beautifully." I asked my father, "What's your favorite work, Dad?" He quickly showed an art with the meaning of hope. "As long as there's hope, you can face any difficulty. Life always needs hope." His strong words and smile stayed with me. When I woke up next, the sight of a hospital room with white curtains fluttering in front of me spread out. I sat up and confirmed that my head was wrapped in bandages. There was a strange discomfort, as if the shock of hitting my head had scattered fragments of my memory. It felt bizarre, like the pain all over my body from falling down the stairs had been a dream. Eventually, a doctor came into the room and asked if I could remember what happened before I lost consciousness. When I clearly answered that I had fallen down the stairs, the doctor showed a relieved expression. It seems there was no major damage to my head or brain from the tests. I had been unconscious for just a few hours, and apparently, my husband and Daniel had called an ambulance. The shaking wasn't that big, and the house is okay, the doctor informed me. So, it was just me getting startled by misstepping. Suddenly feeling embarrassed from the relief, I couldn't help but give a wry smile. Then, I realized that my family, who should have been with me, was nowhere to be seen. When I asked the nearby nurses about my husband and Daniel, they began to exchange glances. One of the nurses hesitated before speaking. "Well, it's hard to say." I tilted my head, watching the young nurse struggle to find her words. Just as the nurse was about to speak, a police officer quietly entered the room. The nurse's expressions changed, and they quickly made way for the officer and left the room. Suddenly feeling scared, I blurted out, "Huh? What?" as a tall police officer sighed deeply and said, "It's difficult to tell you this, but..." I instinctively tilted my head. The nurse before had used a similar kind of word. An unpleasant feeling was spreading through the hospital room. "Right now, your husband and Daniel are at the police station being questioned." With a puzzled look on my face, not understanding what he meant, the officer began to explain gently. When the ambulance arrived, the rescue team that entered our house had called the police. I was unconscious and unaware, but apparently, at that time, instead of being concerned for me, my husband and Daniel were behaving suspiciously upon the police's arrival. When the officer asked to see the staircase where the accident occurred, my husband hesitantly refused, asking, "What's the reason for that?" "Actually, we've been monitoring the two of them for quite some time." "Monitoring? What do you mean by that?" The officer, ignoring my husband and Daniel's objections, went upstairs. After searching the house, they found counterfeit brand goods and forged certificates, leading to their immediate arrest. "Before you fell down the stairs, you were asked to bring some documents." Those documents were forged appraisals. As I slowly grasped the meaning of his words, I felt the blood drain from my face. Was the officer suspecting me of being an accomplice in creating counterfeit goods like them? Based on my husband and Daniel's statements at the police station, they understood I had no involvement in their business. However, to further prove this, I was asked to hand over my smartphone, which I did without hesitation. After being told by the doctor that there were no issues, I took a taxi home. The sky was transitioning from dusk to night as I left the hospital. The taxi was silent, with distant town lights reflecting off the cloudy night sky. I only told the driver where to go, and the taxi moved through unfamiliar streets. My heart felt like it was lost in a maze of darkness. Suddenly, happy memories flashed through my mind. Daniel, when he was younger, used to hand me his school textbooks, notebooks, and various other items that needed his name written on them. When I was busy with the dishes and couldn't help, my husband would laugh and suggest to Daniel, "Mom's busy right now, should Dad write it instead?" "No, I want Mom to do it because her handwriting is so beautiful." While I was washing the dishes, I'd tell them to leave the items on the table, and I would write on them later. My husband, with a mischievous look, would then pick up Daniel's notebook. While Daniel was in the bathroom, my husband, making a teasing face, would say, "I'll copy it perfectly for you," and mimic my handwriting to write the name. After his return from the bathroom, seeing his name already written in the notebook, Daniel would smile broadly and thank me, "Thank you, Mom." Daniel's smile back then was so bright, it squeezed my heart. As the taxi passed through the town, my heart was wrapped in sorrow. I closed my eyes quietly, wishing that when I opened them, everything would just be a dream. I wished I could go back to those times and scold my husband, putting off the dishes to write Daniel's name in his notebook myself. Why did I remember such a trivial thing from the past now? Where did everything go wrong? My emotions were like waves, drawing in despair and sadness, then pushing them away. Amidst this, I started to wonder if my husband and Daniel had their reasons. But what kind of excuse could justify creating counterfeit goods? As I pondered, the taxi arrived at my house without me noticing. An empty home. Without hesitation, I went upstairs to find that the once cluttered room was now bare. The computer and other items might have been seized, with black cords carelessly placed in a corner, making the room feel as if it had been burglarized, devoid of any signs of life. The investigation of my husband and Daniel took several days. From the police station's interrogation and the history on our phones, it was confirmed I had no involvement in selling counterfeit brands. Not only that, but it was also revealed that the two of them had been secretly making counterfeit brands without my knowledge. The officers treated me with sympathy, taking only a simple statement. "Both of them are desperately arguing that you're not involved. They've been proactive in submitting their phones and computers for examination, and your name hasn't come up at all. It seems they really didn't want to cause you any trouble." If they didn't want to cause trouble, why did they do such a thing? I sighed deeply, looking up to the sky. Years passed. On a still chilly spring afternoon, beautiful flowers bloomed in our garden. It's been a year since I restarted my father's studio. Opening the windows of the class, a refreshing breeze passed through. In front of me, 3 students sat up straight in their chairs, beginning to prepare on the desks. I cherished this place I had built with my own hands. "Luna, what are we drawing today?" The oldest student finished preparing and said while getting his brush. I smiled, took my seat, and picked up a brush. "Today, let's draw with the theme of hope. There might be people who are having a hard time. We are all here because we've overcome difficult pasts." The students all listened intently to my words. Then, they all turned to their desks with serious expressions, brush in hand. In the quiet time, the sound of the brush touching the canvas faintly echoed. Time is always a special moment for me. As each student took up their brush and faced their own characters, I too stared at the blank canvas in front of me. My husband and son were fined and sentenced to 1 year in prison for manufacturing and selling counterfeit goods. However, they were given probation after paying compensation to the affected stores and partners, though they ended up in significant debt. Initially, my husband seemed to have been running the shop legitimately. One day, after acquiring a product that was almost like new, he sold it as unused rather than second-hand, making more than double the normal selling price. Realizing that even high-end brand wallets dropped in value without a certificate and that copying the certificate alone could significantly increase the price, he gradually found legitimate sales boring. He started dealing in copied items bought from overseas sites and selling them online. Since everything was concluded within the computer, there was no direct interaction with people, making it harder for them to feel guilty about their actions. This led to outrage among my husband's family members, who then pushed for a divorce. Relatives who knew us well argued that I shouldn't have to bear the burden of my husband's crimes, pushing strongly for separation, and my husband and I eventually divorced. The relatives haven't disowned them. Though they ended up in significant debt, our relatives have been encouraging the two of them to rehabilitate earnestly, finding them jobs, and now they seem to be working hard and living their lives. In a factory owned by our relatives, they've been working diligently from early morning until late at night without complaints. My situation, known through news and rumors, caused a lot of worry among my relatives and the neighbors. Those who've known me since I was a child said, "Luna, you've had it tough," and suggested that I start a class to support myself. Initially, I was hesitant, but losing my husband's income meant I had to find some work, so eventually, my dream began to turn into reality. Students come to show me their works of hope they've finished. I gave my reviews to their works. This part is very beautiful. Here, if you slow down your brush movement, it will be even better. Thank you. After about an hour of class, the students start to clean up. Watching them prepare to leave, I felt a bit talkative and smiled at everyone. Can everyone listen for a moment? The students stopped and looked at me curiously. You all may have had arts classes at school, but here, we're doing artworks too. Though both involve drawing, do you know the difference? Some classes may focus on beauty, but here is all about self-expression. It's not about drawing correctly or with balance. You might draw boldly or even intentionally disrupt the balance. Drawing has the power to express emotions and meanings through works, such as their force or delicacy, sadness. That's why various students come to this class on different days and times. Seeing the hope arts by the students displayed on the wall, I nodded deeply. Everyone's hope seemed to sparkle. I wondered if my works, used as models, had such beauty. Is self-expression through drawing important to you, teacher? Everyone makes mistakes. Just like drawing has the power to express oneself, I believe people can grow through self-expression. After the students left the class, I picked up my brush again alone. Next to my hope work, I added rebirth drawing. I looked up at the clock on the wall. In a few minutes, my husband and Daniel would be coming home for the first time in years. It wasn't that I wanted to start over with my ex-husband that I invited them to the house. I doubt I can forgive my husband and Daniel. But what I've learned from this experience is the importance of respecting each other and living together. They may have committed a crime. But if they are earnestly living their lives and looking for new ways to express themselves, I want to support them. The doorbell rang. I put down the brush and walked to the entrance. Opening the door, I saw my husband and Daniel standing side by side in front of the entrance, hands together, eyes downcast. Seeing them after a long time, they seemed to have grown bigger and stronger than before. Their hair was a bit disheveled, and they wore slightly dirty work clothes, but it strangely suited them. "Please, come in," I said, and my husband quietly nodded, stepping into the entrance. No one knows how our relationship will evolve from here. All I can do is live my best in a future unknown to anyone.